Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Sam Thompson, and I'm the Acting Executive Director at WorkSafe Tasmania. Your presence in person today and online highlights the importance of collaboration for maintaining good mental health in today's very interconnected world. But before we commence, and in recognition of the deep history and culture of this island, we acknowledge Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the original and continuing custodians of the land, sea and sky. We acknowledge and pay our respects to all Tasmanian Aboriginal people, all of whom have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and Aboriginal rights. I'd like to welcome to the stage the Acting Deputy Secretary, Regulation and Service Delivery at the Department of Justice, Robin Pearce. And for those who know Robin's normal job is Executive Director at WorkSafe Tasmania. So thank you, Robin, to officially launch the Working Well study.
Thanks a lot, Sam. Yapalingana, hello and welcome everybody. It's really wonderful to be here with you today. I'm here on behalf of the Deputy Premier and Minister for Small Business and Consumer Affairs, the Honourable Michael Ferguson, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us at reasonably short notice. And, you know, it's really great to be here to launch what is going to be, in our view, a really significant study for Tasmanian workplaces. It's an innovative piece of research which is being spearheaded by the Menzies Institute and University of Tasmania and is being funded by the WorkCover Tasmania Board. And really, this piece of research is going to be fundamental in developing the workplace mental health framework. This is a framework which is being funded by the board, again, as a seminal piece of work to establish a collaborative approach to how do we go about helping Tasmanian workplaces to better manage workplace mental health injuries, to better prevent them and to better support workers who do suffer from mental health injuries or mental health challenges within the workplace. What the Working Well study aims to do is to analyse just how organisations currently go about managing mental health within their workplaces. And it's going to serve as a really vital starting point to understanding what are the capabilities of Tasmanian workplaces in this space. It's not going to be a surprise to anybody here in this room that, you know, Tasmania does have the highest prevalence of long-term mental health issues within Tasmania, and it highlights the need for effective strategies in this space. The Working Well study is focused on Tasmanian workplaces, but it is going to contribute to the body of knowledge that we have that's going to help to support and understand mental health within the broader community. We bring our whole selves to work, we take our whole selves home. Mental health injuries in Tasmania in workplaces continue to rise. You know, they've now increased 102% in the last 10 years and now make up 12% of mental health claims that were made in 2023-24. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge across Australia. It's a challenge Tasmania's got. We have to start to really try to make a difference in this space. So how's the Working Well study going to work? Essentially, there are comprehensive surveys that are going to collect information on the awareness, practices and needs related to mental health management across workplaces. And I strongly encourage employers and workers in Tasmania to engage in these surveys. They really will set about transforming the landscape of workplace mental health in the state. The surveys are confidential, and by participating in the surveys, employers and workers will be committing to enhancing the mental health support that are within the workplace. Workers will have an invaluable opportunity to be able to voice their opinions through an online survey and to share their experiences on mental health management in the workplace. It's important that we not only understand the capabilities from the employer's perspective, but also that we really get a good understanding from the worker's perspective, because sometimes they coincide, but we know often the way that mental health is experienced is different to the way that management might intend it to actually occur. Moreover, all participants are actually going to receive a digital tile that will be able to be used on your email signatures, that will be able to help to show that you're championing this important initiative. And there'll be an opportunity for workers as well to win a voucher as a token of appreciation from being able to participate in the survey. So I do invite everybody to seize the opportunity to drive this positive change in the workplace and to be a champion for the cause. It's so important that employers and workers work together to be able to create safer and more psychologically sound workplaces. And through our combined efforts, we can create an effective and nurturing workplaces that really do prioritise the mental health of everybody. Together, we can truly make a difference. So thank you, Ngāti Ninatu, and please have a look at the survey when it becomes available.
Thanks very much, Robin. Before I invite Rob Walters to address us, I'll speak a little bit more about the initiative and one of the foundational values, which is collaboration. The Working Well study is a really important initiative that's aimed at benchmarking organisational mental health capabilities across Tasmania. As Robin said, it's funded by the WorkCover Board and delivered by the University of Tasmania's Menzies Institute. The partnership between the board and Menzies is testament to the homegrown talent that we have in Tasmania, and it's great that we can use a local provider in Menzies. So thank you. The Working Well study is a foundational step in understanding the current levels of organisational capacity and, as Robin said, encompasses a statewide survey that's designed to capture the awareness, activities and needs related to mental health management in Tasmanian workplaces. The study will highlight the benefits of workplace collaboration, and the study will be a shared effort across Tasmanian workplaces to hear about and to understand what is in place and what is working and where we can improve in fostering psychological safety. The study shows how collaboration across workplaces and workforces improves mental health and can foster more productive and harmonious workplaces for us all. And it should benefit workers, employers, unions, government and others. Why is collaboration, though, so important? Collaboration is communication and it builds a sense of community. And it is one strategy for increasing psychological safety in our workplaces. Collaboration is the opposite of isolation. It's the opposite of siloing, each of which can increase the impact of mental pressures at work. And now more than ever, the fast-paced nature of modern work that's reflected by phone notifications, email notifications, the proliferation of working from home and remote work that rapidly increased during the pandemic makes the need for collaboration now all the more important. Working together towards common goals makes everyone feel valued and heard, countering the isolation that we all so often see in modern workplaces. This often unconsciously structured isolation can harm mental health and lead to lower productivity, absenteeism, and reduced job satisfaction. Fostering a collaborative environment boosts productivity and innovation and creates a supportive workplace where everyone can thrive. A collaborative environment helps workers feel that they belong, which is crucial for well-being. With the significant amount of time that we spend at work, inclusion as part of a community is essential to our well-being. And it's this sense of belonging that boosts mental resilience, helps manage stress and promotes a culture of safety in the workplace, which is something that has ramifications not just within our working lives, but in our personal and home lives as well. When workers feel safe sharing ideas, trust and respect are built, and this openness helps identify and address mental health issues early and encourages workers to seek support when needed. Employers have a responsibility to work together with their workers to create a safer, healthier and mentally well workplace. Through the study, workers will be empowered to speak up about workplace mental health insights and concerns. It is through our actions and our leadership collectively that I urge us all to pledge to work together, to support each other and to prioritise mental health at work. Please get involved in the WorkWell study, as it's one important way to contribute to this growing conversation and body of worldwide knowledge. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Rob Walters. Rob is a very experienced general practitioner with a long-standing interest in health and work, and also a member of the WorkCover Tasmania Board. So thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Sam, and thank you everyone for being here today. As a member of the WorkCover Board Tasmania, and I welcome two of my fellow directors, Julianne and Jess, here today, we appreciate the opportunity to briefly mention today the importance of mental health in the workplace and thus this initiative. I'm a GP and I see the effects of deteriorating mental health literally right before me, clinically and sometimes very emotionally. As an employer, you may see it as loss of productivity, absenteeism, high staff turnover. As an employee, you may see it as stressed workmates, conflict in the workplace, and basically just an unhappy place to go every day. Over the past decade, as Rob said before, mental health claims have increased by 102% in the last year. There are now 143 more claims in that 1 year, so that we've got a total of 726 claims now for mental health reasons. And as Rob said, that's 12% of total workers' compensation claims. Now, the main causes are probably well known to you, and that is mental stress as a result of work pressures, harassment, workplace bullying. One thing I'd like to see tossed into this mix when we do this survey is what effect working from home has had on this issue. It'd be very interesting. But since April 2023, the workplace has a legislated duty to protect the mental health of its workers in the same way as it does to protect their physical health. There's lots of ways that this can be achieved by employers. Leadership, so important. Culture, definitely different cultures in different workplaces. Policies, good practices, risk management, education and training, and good support services for employees. But employees also have a responsibility and a role. They need to participate and notify when they see things or they feel things are going wrong, not to just keep quiet. They need to look after their mates and bring to the attention of their managers when they see people are struggling. Now, it's all very well for us to sit on high and pontificate about how things can be improved. But what we need is evidence. Evidence is something that I work with in my clinical practice all the time. You can't do it without evidence. And that's where this initiative comes into place. Participating in the WorkWell study will give us that evidence, and it'll give it to us from both sides. The WorkCover Board and WorkSafe Tasmania are proud to be part of this initiative in collaboration with Menzies and the University of Tasmania. And I urge you to participate in cultivating workplace environments that promote mental health well-being and where it's safe for people to come to work. To use an old line, safe bodies and safe minds. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rob. Before Rob goes too far away, I will introduce the panel for this afternoon's panel discussion. This panel will explore mental health in the workplace, highlighting the importance of collaborating in promoting a mentally healthier Tasmania and the role of the Working Well study within our broader workplace mental health framework project. Could I introduce, please, firstly, Rob Walters again, and I'll read out Rob's significantly longer biography. Rob's been practising as a general practitioner in Hobart for over 37 years. He has, as I said, been a member of the WorkCover Board since 1997 with vast experience on boards and councils, including for Primary Health Tasmania, the Australian Divisions of General Practice, Cancer Council Tasmania, the Asbestos Safety and Eradication Council, Headspace, Beyond Blue and Rural Alive and Well, many of which have an important mental health focus. Thank you, Rob. Can I introduce next Professor Angela Martin, please? I feel this is slightly like the Oscars, calling someone's name and they come down, except I have no prizes to give out other than the immortal glory of having contributed to safer workplaces. Angela is Professor of Work and Mental Health at the Menzies Institute for Medical Research at the University of Tasmania. And Angela's expertise in occupational health psychology and management education has influenced workplace mental health research, policy and practice nationally and internationally. So thank you, Angela. May I introduce next Bree Clerk, please. Bree is the General Manager of the Mental Health Council of Tasmania and has more than 15 years' experience in the not-for-profit sector. With a foundation in social science, management and collaborative governance, she specialises in mental health policy and system improvement. So thank you so much for being with us, Bree. Next, I'd like to introduce Jessica Munday. Jessica was elected as the Secretary of Unions Tasmania in 2017. She's the leader of the trade union movement in Tasmania. Unions Tasmania is the peak body for unions in Tasmania and represents roughly 50,000 workers across industry and in the public and private sectors. And Jess has extensive experience advocating for the work health and safety rights of workers, including as a member of the WorkCover Board. So thank you, Jess. Finally, may I introduce Kelly Broughton, please. Kelly is a project officer at the Working Well project at the Menzies Institute for Medical Research. Kelly has research experience in physical and psychological injury and illness, with research projects focusing on workplace conditions, return to work experiences, and overall return to work outcomes as a result of these things. And we're really pleased to have Kelly's in-depth experience sitting with us today. So, thank you, everyone. As I indicated before, the question that I'd really like to ask relates to collaboration, and that is, how does collaboration in the workplace contribute to overall mental well-being in the workplace, firstly? And secondly, why is participating in the Working Well study significant for both employers and workers? So, Rob, can I firstly ask you about collaboration, please?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, look, this is one, and I have a little bit of a pet subject on this, and that's called communications. What always amazes me when I'm seeing someone through workers' comp for mental health issues is the lack of communication on the whole that occurs with most employers. I just don't understand why they don't communicate more. Now, it's not just one-way traffic. The employee too has a responsibility to talk to the employer. But if we could get two-way traffic on this, I'm sure that the not only would it be in the interests of the worker, the affected worker, but it would also shorten the time that by the time communications get going, often through insurers or rehab providers or whatever, just stretches this whole thing out, such that I think it's now an average of 60 days for mental health claims to come back, and a lot of them are much longer than that, and some don't even return at all. So I think one of the really important things about collaboration is communications both ways between the worker and employers and insurers, and again, something that insurers should be doing on behalf of their clients.
Thanks very much, Rob. Angela, may I ask you, what is it, do you think, that is the roadblock to that communication? Is it a lack of, say, management education? Is it a fear? What do you think are the roadblocks to improving that communication that Rob speaks about?
Great question, and there are lots of things in the answer. I'll try to think of some. I think, thinking about businesses and workers, and this is probably something Jess will talk about too, just the motive and the sort of outcomes that are being sought. Like at the end of the day, employees are, wanting to earn an income, they're wanting to use their skills, follow their interests, hopefully get some meaning from the work that they do. And private sector organisations have a profit motive, return to shareholders. So at that big picture macro level, there are some differences, I think, that come into play that may make the reporting of issues by employees not feel safe in terms of their job security. I think that's a big blocker of employee reporting of psychosocial risks, for example, not wanting to be complaining about their workplace or seen as having that affect their retention of their job or their advancement within the organisation. So I think that can be a real barrier. But the fact that you mentioned management education is speaking to my heart, because that's what I've spent the last 10 years of my life working on, is trying to get managers to understand the relevance, firstly, of mental health at work, how it can be used to actually benefit their organisation, and the sorts of skills, systems, processes they need to set up to actually create that kind of mentally healthy work environment. But there's still a really long way to go in bringing together, employees' perspectives and employers' perspectives. And we see that in the evidence all the time in the surveys, quite big discrepancies between what employees feel this workplace is like and what managers say it's like. So there are lots of things involved in why that communication isn't, absolutely optimised at the moment. Some of it's political, structural, some of it is skills-based and experience-based, and some of it's personal attitudes as well. My early work was looking at how managers stigmatise employee depression, that whole idea that you should just be able to snap out of it and get your shit together and start doing your work properly, please. So, I'm thinking back to 10 years ago of being on the phone to employers, asking them about mental health and them saying, we don't have any people here that have mental health problems. So there was that kind of big denial. Anyway, I've spoken long enough. There's probably other things people want to say.
They're really interesting observations. Thanks so much, Angela, and I'm disappointed that we don't have the rest of the afternoon set aside to finish talking about that. May I ask, Bree, you deal with mental health not just in the workplace, but also mental health issues that arise in people's personal and home lives. Could you talk to us about how collaboration in the workplace not just informs mental health at the workplace, but how that can travel out and affect mental health more generally? Workers' mental health more generally, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sam. I guess one of my interests here is around that prevention and early intervention. And given that about 50% of Tasmanians are currently in the workforce. That's a huge amount of the population that we can enable and enhance overall mental health and wellbeing just by making supportive workplaces. Of course, we can't control the external factors that might be happening in an employee's mental health, such as relationship breakdowns or financial pressures, but we certainly can control how people turn up to work each day and what the supportive environment can be like, whether we're promoting positive mental health and wellbeing and educating through workplaces, or reducing the stresses of everyday work, providing flexibility so people can support their families when they need to. These are all things that can really enhance overall wellbeing of the population.
Great. Thanks so much. They're really important insights, Bree. Jess, could I ask you, please, particularly in relation to Angela's comments about what are some of those roadblocks to collaboration, and what do you see in your role at Unions Tasmania?
I see all the bad things. Yes. Yep. Nobody rings me of a morning to say, "Oh, Jess, I just wanted to tell you that my employer is fantastic at caring for my mental health." Although actually someone did tell me once about their Are You OK Day morning tea, and that didn't go down very well with me if Are You OK Day morning tea is the only thing that you do for your workers' mental health. Look, I think they are, many and varied, and Ange touched on a lot of those. And I was doing a little bit of a look back on sort of the evolution of how we think about safety and what sort of approach we take to safety at work. And 100 years ago, it was very individualised, right? So it was sort of those, like, safety practitioners will have heard of the sort of careless worker sort of theory, that, that a worker makes a mistake and they do something and there's an injury or an accident as a result of that. So we can fix that by working with that individual worker and making sure they don't make a mistake. Our current system, as it is built, is actually built on what is a safe work theory rather than the worker theory, which is an acknowledgement, right, that by the time someone suffers or incurs an injury or illness, there's going to be multiple causes that have contributed to that, and we need to look at the safe systems and processes around how they came to be injured. Even further on, more modern development of theory these days says if you don't have safety culture right, none of that actually works. So I think if we, as a practitioner of the of the law, as well as someone who deals with this regularly, our whole system is built, and our Work Health and Safety Act is built around the concept of cooperation and collaboration. That is, like, when we harmonised the laws mostly across the country over a decade ago, it put that at the heart of what we were supposed to do when we were thinking about safety. That's why there's elected health and safety representatives. That's why there is a dedicated role for employees in our safety system to help facilitate that. I just came from a conference of educators and in our state's public schools, and I can say I think we've got a really long way to go in addressing sort of mental health at sort of the industry or the sector or the level. I think there's the goodwill. Absolutely. I think it's great that you're here. I really hope that you can help us get the message to others who aren't here, because I probably think if you're here, you've got some investment in this anyway. But I genuinely think too, my advice, and maybe this is my industrial background, Sam, consultation is not telling somebody about a decision and not giving them a chance to influence it. So it's actually even worse when you're telling people that you're going to consult with them, but actually you're just telling them what your organisation's going to do without actually asking them if it's going to work.
Thanks so much, Jess. They're really interesting observations and a lot of food for thought there. Kelly, may I ask you, you've got a lot of experience focusing on workplace conditions and return to work experiences and outcomes. Could you talk to us, please, about the modern and changing forms of work and how this affects collaboration and whether it changes the nature of collaboration that we need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. And that's a really great question. As you've said, a lot of my research has looked into people returning to work following either physical or psychological injury or illness. And ironically enough, it was done in the pandemic when everything had to move online. What we now know is that when people are even having to work from home, there are so many more hazards that we need to be aware of. When we go into a workplace, we know that everything is physically safe. We know that there's no tripping hazards. We know that the chairs are ergonomical. There's no guarantee of that at home. And there's no guarantee that someone is in a safe work environment at home either. So there's no guarantee that they're going to be safe working in that space. And then if they have an injury on top of that, then reporting that injury in itself, reporting that you get injured is difficult enough. There's so many people that just want to crack on with it, don't even bother reporting their injury or their illness because of the stigma associated with it, of fear of reprisal. A lot of people don't report injuries or illness out of fear of not being able to advance their career. So having all those worries and then having to report on top of that it happened at home because I don't have the right chair, or I tripped over my dog as I was walking to my desk. Things like that are going to be so much more difficult, and then having to then go through the process of having to return to work, whether it be at home still or back in the workplace, it just creates so many more difficulties. And then if you're trying to discuss that with your supervisor or your manager and your manager's not receptive, then that creates additional issues in itself. So not only are you looking at the initial injury or illness, you're looking at the potential for secondary injury or illness. And then it just continues to compound and it gets worse and worse and worse. So it's really important to open that dialogue from the get-go, even if people are working at home, that you do need to report whether you do become injured or whether you are ill. You need to collaborate and make sure that there's no fear of reprisal or fear of getting into trouble so that people can actually be open and honest. Otherwise, the injury and illness rates will continue to rise, unfortunately.
May I just ask as a follow-up, and building on some of the things that Rob said about people's reluctance to raise mental health concerns, how do we improve the willingness and ability to have those discussions early, hopefully before they get to the stage of an injury, whether an initial psychosocial injury or a secondary injury?
I think workplace culture has a lot to do with it. People aren't going to report injuries or illness, specifically psychological, if they don't feel like it's a safe space to do so. A lot of people will think that their managers will then view them as a problem. I think we also need to look at it as a way to educate managers as well, that it's not their role to then become a therapist or to fix everything, and that burden doesn't fall on them. But they need to be aware of the mechanics of the injury or illness and how that impacts a person. So the manager's not expected to solve or fix the psychological illness, but they are expected to understand how it impacts them and then go from there and be able to support them in the best ways possible. Thanks very much for that.
Could I just add
yes, please, Rob.
Particularly to what Angela said about the old mentality of just, get a grip and pull yourself together. Managers that do that or employers that do that at their peril, because we all in our lifetimes will have a major issue mentally. 1 in 2 will have a serious treatable issue. And whilst it might not have happened to them and they might be on their ascendancy, climbing through the ranks, etc., I would strongly urge them to be very careful, because it could come back and bite them on the bot. In that, and we see it in leaders now, and I compliment a lot of the leaders who do actually come out publicly and say they're struggling. Some of the politicians have done it recently, some high-profile sports people. I compliment them, because it makes it more acceptable, and therefore people are more likely to be able to do it. But we do still find this stigmatisation, as Angela described it, often put on, and almost sort of fed to the other workers that Fred's off, he's gone a little bit loopy, this sort of nonsense. And it's very dangerous, and it really does create a poor culture, and doesn't encourage the reporting early.
Before I go to audience questions, is there anything that any of the other panel members wanted to say on those topics? Please, Angela.
Just on your theme around collaboration, which I think is great, that applies to so many things. At a very big picture, I would like to sort of acknowledge that our collaboration between government and the university, that's really great in positioning this project. But within every organisation, all the different functions and departments and roles have to collaborate in order to make it a mentally healthy workplace. Now, what I see when I'm working with individual businesses is there's big fights about who owns it, safety or HR or, diversity and inclusion. And the answer is they all own it and they have to collaborate in order to, really achieve strategic objectives. So that's really important as well. And just, long-time collaborations I wanted to mention. I wanted to acknowledge the board actually funded one of my first studies in this area, and Rob was an amazing talent on a DVD that we made trying to get the mental health topic on the radar in small businesses 10 years ago, which was really fantastic. And another example of collaboration I wanted to mention is the Mind Games. We've got Sherry here. They've raised a lot of money and a lot of awareness around workplace mental health. Again, that's been a collaboration because Menzies has received some funding for us to sort of begin developing the idea for this survey. Collaboration is the key, really, to creating change. I just wanted to point out some of those too.
Really important observations. Thanks so much. I might pass the mic to Jess, if that's all right. Thanks.
Yes. Excellent. I've achieved my dream. This is a much quieter room than I'm used to. I've literally got 3 microphones. I say being a union leader is an amazing job for me because I cannot sing, but I get to, get up in front of a microphone all the time. I just wanted to pick up Rob's point. I think leadership is actually critical, and I think for a long time we have associated leadership with mental strength and mental illness as weakness, and we've done that in the way that if you fell off a ladder at work, you would not be viewed as somehow inherently a weaker person. But if you were to take time away for your mental health to address an issue, that I think that is really important. But I genuinely do think putting things like your intention has to match your action around this, and the amount of, for example, we train health and safety representatives, and the amount of people who tell us that they've got a biannual or an annual workplace inspection where they go and tick off the cords and the various things that are supposed hazards, and no one talks about mental health though. We couldn't put on. I've had employers come and work with me and say, this is the first organisation I've worked with where where our risk assessment for our hazards here is about our mental health, or that we invest in training people about what to look for, that we invest in peer support. We do all of these things, which are all collaborative efforts, and they all say to your workers, in a really practical way, this matters here.
Thanks so much, Jess.
Would someone like any of my multiple microphones?
Yes, could I invite any questions firstly from the in-person audience, and then I'll go to the online audience today. Any questions from the in-person audience about the importance of collaboration in the workplace and the Working Well study? Yes, please. We'll pass down a mic. Thanks, Robin.
They don't all work, that's why.
Thank you. Yes, it is working. It's been really great to hear about collaboration. I do wonder, though, whether there's going to be a place in this study for people who are self-employed. Who do they collaborate with? Or even for family businesses, the local shop or a farm. I also recognise collaboration is really important, but to collect some background data or look at some strategies for those areas, I think would be useful.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point about collaborating not just with colleagues or peers, but with others. I might invite Angela to respond to that.
Yes, but I don't think any of the microphones are working.
What about this one?
It's the magic mic.
That's an excellent question, and actually the whole concept of self-employed wellbeing is something that I really want to do further work on, because it is always one of the things that's kind of off to the side. I do know with this particular study, because we're looking at the Work Health and Safety Act that applies to PCBUs that employ, we have had to take a decision of, looking for businesses that are 4 employees or more. But a self-employed person is also in the labour market, as you say, and in fact there's a lot more challenges if you're an independent or solo worker, because you don't have any of those other sort of supports around you, and you have to do health and safety to yourself. So I'm really aware of that as an issue. The people that are self-employed can still provide data in our survey for the workers survey, but they wouldn't be expected to have policies and practices and things in place if they're not directly employing another person. So can we just say that it's a relevant issue? I know someone that's just finished her PhD on that exact topic, looking at the dynamics of power of, being a provider for a large organisation, and, the dynamics involved in that. You can have really poor job control as an independent worker too. So unfortunately it's not the main topic for this work, but it is definitely on my radar for further research. So thanks for the question.
Thanks so much, Angela, and thank you for that great question. Rob, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just on that subject, though, there's a stakeholder that doesn't get a lot of mention and sometimes a lot of credit, and that's the insurer. And the insurer of a self-employed person can be of enormous support and benefit in these situations, given if they have a sensitive approach to this sort of issue. And I've seen both approaches. And I tell you what, it makes a huge difference to that person, because you feel so alone and so isolated. And, of course, the GP often has to talk to the insurer. And so your GP and insurer would be the people that I would suggest to the self-employed person are your main assistants. But I just do want to shout out to the insurers, because some of them are very good at it, some not so good.
Thanks very much, Rob. Any other questions from the audience, please? We'll bring a mic down.
Hi, I'm Stuart Lovell from Allianz, personal injury. Look, I'd have a comment first and then I'll throw it to you guys, because it all resonates with us. And Allianz are very passionate in this field. I sit as part of a national team, and look, we're very heavily invested in this space. So just paint a little scenario for you guys, and then I'll ask the question. So I get to see a lot of businesses around Tassie, get to go and sit in front of the executives. And you can guarantee it's very, very similar everywhere I go. So I've got a finance person, a HR person, a safety person, a return to work person in the room. And the first question comes from the finance person: how do we get our claims costs down? You're charging us too much. We've got too much on our... I just say, stop having claims. And they look at me and I say, I'm not being flippant, but you don't have claims, it doesn't cost. So my whole point is let's be proactive. Let's be proactive in this space. And look, it's especially in this area of mental health, back to 10 years ago, it would be Stuart has come and he's put in a workers' comp claim for stress. And first thing that the employer would do, and probably the insurer, would say, we've got to dispute this claim. We've got to know what's going on. What's happening? Stuart's probably had a blue with his missus. His dog might have passed away. He might have had something happen on the weekend. This is obviously nothing to do with work. To now the wheel's turning, and I say to these guys, well, why isn't it to do with work? Don't you employ Stuart? He gives you something back for what you're paying, so why aren't you looking after him, whether he's well at home or well at work? And one of the barriers that I see is that a lot of businesses really want to be invested in it, and right at the top, they do everything that they can to support it. Right at the bottom, the workers are all over it as well, with the support of the unions and the professionals and all of that. But where the real crux is and the barrier is the middle management, and that's what I see, and not in just my role now, but previously, is that middle management generally has been somebody who's been on the tools and has been good at being on the tools and hasn't really kicked up or done a great deal wrong in their career, and they've moved up the ladder because they're a good bloke and they're good at being on the tools, and they get into that position, but they don't train them into HR, finance, safety, wellbeing. So can I just throw that to you guys to add to that comment, please?
Angela, could I invite you to respond first? Is that all right? Only because I know it's a really strong area of interest for you.
Absolutely, that was awesome, and I totally agree with what you're talking about there. So it's also this middle management piece that I was saying, where I've been trying to put my effort is in training, trying to get, a little bit of a mind shift that needs to happen. And you're right, it's going from technical to people manager, where there's so many issues. Like, doesn't matter what kind of business it is, I see that absolutely everywhere. So the other thing is holding managers accountable and seeing that people management is a capability that they have to either learn or develop or get better at, over time, because it's hard to take on a management role. Most people in here probably have some experience of what it's like to have to lead a team, and when you've got a team that there's lots of problems or people aren't well, they're sick a lot, whatever, that can be really stressful. And if you're not self-aware, that stress just comes back out there and creates more risk for those around them. So I think that piece around management education is critical. It doesn't have to be an MBA like where I was teaching at the university. It can be short courses, they can be internal, or they could be industry based, but I feel like there's a lot of potential exactly in that area. So one of the things that will be great coming out of the study is, the sort of information about the specific forms of knowledge and capability that we want to be setting up, maybe industry focused, small certificates and micro courses, etc. So I think that's exactly where we need to go.
Thanks, Angela. Anyone else on the panel want to respond to that really good question?
Thanks, Stuart. I think that's really fascinating, and certainly I've seen that the middle management needs that extra support and encouragement. And thinking about that, particularly capabilities around building emotional intelligence and awareness, I think, those middle managers are kind of the front line, or even the gatekeeper to making sure that their direct reports are supported and feel safe and feel open and comfortable enough to come and say, hey, I'm really struggling and I need some support, and then be trusted enough by their manager that the manager will say, okay, what can we do? What kind of supports and flexibility arrangements can we put in place if we can? So certainly an area that I think will be really important in the framework.
Thanks so much. Jess?
I incurred a physical injury, nodding vigorously to your comment, Stuart, because... No, it's true, though. I am deeply passionate. If any of us in this room have supported someone who has suffered a workplace injury, the absolutely life-changing negative impact that can have on them, from the original injury to the claims process to, its implication. It is... I have sat with people who will never be the same again because they were injured at work, and my personal theory is there's a deep level of trust that is breached when someone's work hurts them, and it's hard. It's very hard to recover from. And I think, if we are, like, your shout out to prevention is absolutely right. Like, I want to see fatality and injury rates decrease at a much faster rate than they are, and that is all about if we put our efforts into making them not happen in the first place. And also, I think my cautionary sort of tale to people is it doesn't have to be a particular any more or less onerous in terms of managing that for you. There are very easy ways you can be supportive, particularly in smaller organisations, that will make the world of difference. So I just thank you for that, because that is, like, this is what we're about. And hopefully if what we start to learn from and what we get data-wise out of this survey helps us drive prevention, then, like, all of our efforts would have been worth it.
I agree with every single thing that everyone has said. One thing that we do know is just how much impact supervisors and co-workers have, especially when those people are injured. But one thing that I think we need to educate middle management with is that we really need to think about context. We need to think about the situations that people are in. With a physical injury, there's a start and there's a finish, right? So someone falls over, they break their leg, they're on crutches, they do the rehab, their leg's not broken anymore. With psychological injury, it's so different. It's like this. Has anyone ever seen a slinky that's like all knotted up? It's like that. You don't know where it starts, where it ends, the impacts that it's going to have. But you need to know what's going on at work, in someone's life. You need to understand that that's not going to be a stock standard one-size-fits-all for everyone. It looks completely different for everyone. So I think one of the massive things that we're going to really find is that education piece for managers and how we can help emphasise how we can personalise understanding psychological injury and illness for everyone.
Thanks so much. They're really great observations, and thank you for the excellent question. Are there any other questions in Yeah, oh, sorry, Rob, of course.
You can get a mic.
There's a word that we don't use often enough when we're talking about middle management. That's leadership. And I'm a Demons supporter. And we've got a perfect example going on at the moment with Christian Petrarca, one of the best footballers in the league, who was injured physically and now has got serious mental health issues as a result of the fact, and I come back to my old subject of comms, communication, the fact that he wasn't communicated with whilst he was off having his spleen out, his ribs fixed and intensive care in hospital. It's a workplace for him. Same sort of thing. We're talking about leadership. So why don't companies invest in their very good tradies who they promote? It's not a long course. They call it man management, and it's a very fundamental thing, but it can be taught, and it can raise issues and therefore make them so much better in what they do and cost a lot less than the subsequent workers' comp claims.
Thanks so much, Rob. Any other questions from the in-person audience? Stephanie, any questions online? Well, thank you very much for those really insightful observations. Can we give a big round of applause to our panel, please? In conclusion, thank you so much, everyone, for coming along today, and thank you for your attendance online. Can I urge everyone as we go about our afternoon to mention to our colleagues, to mention to our customers, to mention to our managers, to those at home, the importance of being conscious of mental health in the workplace, and particularly this WorkWell study that we're really pleased to launch today. And can we urge those people to complete it, please? Because although it's not going to be the panacea, it's one piece in that really important puzzle, or one step towards untangling that slinky that we heard about before. So thank you very much for coming along today. Please stay for a cup of tea and coffee. talk amongst yourselves. Really pleased to have such an experienced panel and members of the WorkCover Board here today, so thank you very much.